David, it's so good to see you. Welcome back from your travels. I'm always jealous of following your blogs about your adventures. But for those listeners who haven't met you, can you talk a little bit about your current role at Atlassian, a little bit about the org, whatever you can share?
Sure. Yeah, it's been exciting. It's actually been over a year. I've kind of celebrated my 1 year anniversary at the company at
Congrats.
Atlassian, right? Yeah, it's kind of exciting. It's in some ways it seems like a long time, and sometimes it seems very short, right? Uh, but yeah, I'm the chief information security officer, looking overall the entire security for the company, and it's very very exciting, right? Of always being in high tech and being security, but also being part of, I call it the AI wave, right? Is so certainly at Atlassian here, AI is a big part of our platform, our workflows, and our product offering, and so it's exciting to one of like how we ensure that our AI platform is secure, and at the same time how we can use AI for our security functions. And I think that's really is exciting, right? And I think a lot of companies don't actually realize it's actually both. You need security for AI, and you need AI for security.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a good perspective, and kind of to roll back a little bit the tape. And uh, Atlassian is an incredibly international, incredibly large, and incredibly acquisitive corporation, and it's everything from Jira to scheduling tools to everything between. Is it all kind of one um, single client, or are they all run separately? Is it how geographically distributed is? If you can share some of the details, I think it'll be interesting for people to understand about the inner workings.
Yeah, Atlassian, I think it's actually quite a few products and things like that. And I know I'll probably miss one of them, but we go everything from Jira and Confluence, right, to Bitbucket, right? Now we have Trello and Loom, right? Now we've acquired DX and the browser company. So we're actually a lot of diverse set of products. And it's pretty interesting is that one of the elements is that historically a lot of these things like Jira and Confluence has been running people's data centers, but now we're helping everybody take their applications and data to move it to the cloud, right? Because we know the cloud is the future. The other element is we got our AI platform Rovo. Is it's not just about the developer platform, which Rovo Dev and CLI and things like that is amazing for developers, but it's also the workflows for the knowledge workers as well. The things that we can with our workflows and graphs and putting things together. It's really quite exciting, and it's all happening in the cloud.
Interesting. And is there kind of a play to become a platform, or are they still run bespoke kind of point solutions addressing specific needs of developers or uh, IT departments of various organizations? Or is it at some point going to become, I don't know, would challenge I don't know, Microsofts and Googles of this world?
Well, I think it's definitely becoming a platform in itself. It's not just about the developers, not just about the IT worker and project management, right? It's all about the workflows and graph and bringing things together as a collective, for users to do many things. And it's not Jira's not just for the developer anymore, right? We can think of many different things. Is For example, is like people that hey they want to do travel management and other things and expensing. It's like Jira is a wonderful platform and bring all the things together, tied back to policies that are in Confluence and other things. So it's really quite amazing.
Interesting. And to double click on the AI thread, and I
Hmm.
want to make a prediction. When we all go to RSA in March of 2026, I I have a prediction that every single company at the expo will have AI either in the name or in the tagline, on the byline, or in the pitch. So as it was zero trust a few years ago, before that, or cloud security before that, it's going to be all AI. And I think it's pretty informed bet. Having been at reInvent a few weeks ago, it seems it's such a big wave that everyone is latching on and riding this. What are your thoughts?
I think in some ways is we all know that just like smartphones, right? They're never going to go away, right? But so the way that I think of AI is kind of like in a way of cars, right? Of course we have seatbelts, but now can you buy a car without airbags anymore? Can you buy a car without satellite radio anymore, right? It's becoming a kind of commoditized, and it's something that you need, right? And so you think now, would you buy a car without airbags? Of course not, right? That's silly, right? So now, are you going to buy a product or service that does not have AI? already starting to think of like, no way, why would I want something that does not have AI, right? It's part of the future. It's becoming a baseline.
And so, and kind of from the perspective of using AI for cybersecurity, where do you see the puck is going? Where do you see opportunities, and where do you see interesting startups in that space? In other words, which problem sets in your view, are the most compelling for? And I'm sure a lot of the startups probably still in stealth, so some of those information is public. But what opportunity sets do you see you think are the most compelling for the startups to address, to attack some of the gaps, or develop AI capabilities to address cybersecurity challenges? Where do you see the most promise?
Well, let me first start say with something to say. Certainly, I think it was a great discussion. Not that long ago, I was at the CISO cab, for with Google, right? We're talking about an element which I think Gardner also talks about. Is that AI is great, but you need to actually measure the value proposition. It's like great, you can use AI, but you're going to use so many tokens. The 1% or 1 hour of savings you're going to get from AI is not worth the $1,000 in compute time that you spent getting that, right? So the fun thing is you got to look at various scenarios, and some are going to make sense, and some are not, economically. Now, certainly, I think one of the where it's emerging very, very quickly, and I think one of the challenges is that things are moving so quickly. Do you want to lock in to a certain solution or framework quite yet, right? It's actually a moment. It's like, you really need to. It's not about waiting, right? But it's more of like observing, because the dynamics and things are changing so quickly. It may not be ready to lock in quite with one solution yet because it's evolving. Now, certainly, I think one of the most interesting things is that everybody, from both a security perspective as well as AI for security, is looking at agentic, right? The agents. We need to look at how you're going to manage the identities, how you're going to manage the entitlements. Is there logging, and looking at the logging, and then how can you monitor what they're doing? Are they doing the right things or the wrong things? Right? Agents are the future. They are clones of the humans, right? Yet at the same time, they're not human. They're not service accounts, but they're not humans either, right? So I think this is the biggest paradigm that is coming in that we all need to look at, and it's probably one of the biggest opportunities for the future.
Interesting. And it's interesting that you mentioned about the platforms. I'm dating myself, but there was a battle between VHS format and Betamax. And Betamax was, from technological perspective, was a superior platform. And yet, through a series of strategic moves, VHS really captured the market. So if you're a betting person, even betting on the best may not yield you the best results, because the platform that is a close runner-up may get better adoption and better distribution. So it certainly makes a lot of sense. And and specifically for agentic AI, is there anything that you could share in terms of the startups you see in the space that are kind of entered the race and up and running and public? Public meaning there's information about them that could be shared.
Well, certainly I got to be careful here. Element is evolving, but I think one of the challenges in having discussions, right, is like, do you want to look at things as from just an identity management perspective? This is where you see like, Microsoft Entra and Okta are coming into play. It's like, do you want to manage it from an identity perspective? Or there's another pivot to this. Do we want to look at things from a dev or developer perspective, right? Is that, hey, should we look at how agents are built, right? And then making sure that they're going to have all the right entitlements, the monitoring, the logging, and the type of things every time they're built and operated, so that you don't run into these shadow agents, right? And that's kind of like the third area, right? Is kind of like, are we going to have like the agent security posture management, just like we have the SaaS posture management tools, right? Are we going to see the agent posture management tools and the monitoring, right? Are they all going to blend together? I think that's the big thing. Are we going to have a third? Certainly we have identity and access management for human identities. We have identity and access management for non-human identities. Do we want a third one for agent identities? I don't think so. We kind of want it merging together. And I think the same way, just like for an element of other elements, we don't want another console, another infrastructure. We want them working with our existing ones.
Interesting. Yeah, this whole concept of single login and or not have bespoke products, I think was the biggest claim to fame from CrowdStrike when they famous. I think that's what I heard when there was a presentation by CrowdStrike at RSA last year or maybe 2 years ago, that every single company they acquire, they're all in within the same agent, so you don't need to kind of split screens or split compute. It certainly makes a lot of sense. Interesting. So we are recording December 19th, and certainly a good time to take a look at 2025 in the rearview mirror and assess the biggest trends and the biggest events. What happened there? In your view, what are the biggest and events can be technologies, breaches, regulation, geopolitics. What sticks out for you as you look back at last 12 months?
What sticks out the past moment? Certainly, I think one of the things is certainly, the most recently in the past, couple of months actually, is let's talk about supply chain security, right? And I think that certainly we had the NPM packages and things like that. We didn't have one; we had multiple cases coming through, right? And so we've been talking about supply chain security for a while now. We know it's a problem, but now look how fast, right? And problematic this became, that companies need to look at. It's like, okay, what am I looking at for my repositories, right? And do I need to, kind of have some buffering to my artifactories, right? Do I need to have more threat intelligence, tied to every package I take into, to my environment, right? In correlation, that's opened up a whole new world, right? Certainly, we've seen that, one great startup, a small one, right, that works mainly with GitHub Actions, right? Step security, right? It really started catching these things, saying, hey, you pull this package and it's doing something you don't think it's doing, right? Or it's calling out. And people never thought of this happening before. But so I think supply chain security is in the very early stages of maturation. And we need supply chain security things like step security and others, or looking at your pipelines and your artifactories. So I think that's one of the new things here, that AI can certainly help, but you need to have those fundamental things. So I think it's be interesting to see how that evolves a little bit here at RSA in the next couple of months.
Mm-hmm. It's specifically about related to open source, right? So when organizations use open source tech, and it's a lot of those libraries are managed by volunteers, they get tired over the years or check out or move on, and then the domain comes up, and someone would snap the domain and create malicious code and push it into, and it goes into production because companies assume that it's maintained by bona fide developer who's been consistent over the years, but then something happens. It's not as robust, and it's not as reliable. So when you talk about supply issues with supply chain, it's specifically about open source, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of interesting that, who's not using open source, right? And it's not just the third parties, the fourth party and other type of libraries, right? And that's one element. And certainly, I think it was at Black Hat Europe, as Microsoft announced that Microsoft, their bug bounty, they're looking at not just the Microsoft products, but things that they may have a dependency on, right? Which may be open source, right? So we're seeing that world opening up again here, which I think is very, very important as a community, because we got a problem kind of brewing here.
Interesting. So if you were to name top three, that was one, will be some two other top of mind events, developments, use cases in 2025?
Let's see. Certainly, I think that we're starting to see again a little bit of the overall, not just the supply chain, right, but really looking at the vulnerabilities and big ones, coming in, where companies are still looking, trying to understand. And you think about prioritization of things, is that, okay, I've got log4j, right? Is like, hey, is it actually, I've got the package, but is it accessible, right? Is there any path to it? Is it being used or not? And I think a lot of companies are is saying that you can't just rip out the package, right, or orphan. Those aren't simple, but really, is it really accessible, right? Is there an exploitation path? And this is where I think they need some of the companies need to kind of looking at tools to help them understand that. We're starting to see more and more of startups start to come into play in this particular area to kind of help companies that may need more than just understanding is, do I have the package in my repository? Do I have this package, on my system or not, right? Because it's not just simple, oh, do a patch and everything's happy.
Interesting. I had a conversation recently with a handful of professionals, and one topic came up, and I just was curious to get your take. And it was specifically about insider threats. It could be insider threats. I mean, it's cases when someone is working remotely or applying for a job, and one person applying, another person is doing the interview. There were cases when one person had 3 jobs and would farm it out, writing code to like third parties. There were cases. I think you brought up Microsoft. I think it was specifically Microsoft when they noticed a minuscule delay in keystrokes and realized that the person they hired was what they thought was stateside was actually North Korea. So and so it's more around kind of identity and more around tools that some malicious applicants would use AI or even like fake identities to apply for jobs and go through interview process by using AI like avatars. It seems to be emerging, but I'm an outsider looking in. I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah, I think this is another one of the great topics, right? So as we talk about, I think it's the overall, say, if we call it the fraudulent workers, right? And there's a whole category, so everything, the overemployed, the person that just like, the person that took the SAT for you, right? Instead of you taking it, right? Hey, people interviewed for you so you could get the job. And then there's certainly DPRK, right? And myself and some others, we actually published a paper here from ITISEC, the SaaS Special Interest Group, right, on this topic. And it's reality, I think every company now needs to look at this, right, is that of the fraudulent workers, the DPRK and things like that, and having the tools and processes in place. Now, I think it's what's very important. It's not just like, oh, detecting AI or detecting, a faked video, things like that. It's more than that. You need to have threat intelligence signals, right? Saying you need to actually have identity verification, capabilities, right, through a service. You need to be looking at interviewer training, right, and recruiter training to looking all the various signals and pulling it together. It's not just one of those is the simple answer. You're going to get that entire breadth of things. And so you actually need to have programs and processes in place to pull together the signals, because it takes a couple of yellow flags to actually make it a red flag. It's not going to be one thing. I think the person's looks like they're using AI. That's not what you're looking for. It's the entire collection of things.
It's interesting. This morning, I think it was kind of probably on LinkedIn. There was a post about this problem being so prevalent that HR are starting to use the crutch, which basically what you described as something that should go away with more robust tools, but they would put, a little bit of a quote unquote Trojan horse in the job description. They would say your skills need to include putting together roast beef sandwich or something like this, and then if applicant would reply that yes, I'm capable of doing that, then obviously it was not done by a human, and that's for them was a red flag, which I think was silly and funny. And to your point, probably in the need of more robust tools to screen and to kind of address that issue of kind of bait and switch or AI applying for human jobs and things like this.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see that hey, great, you can still do the full, identity check and things like that. But then, but did someone else interview for you and people not notice it or things like that? There's many things, but it's putting all the signals together, just like great detection engineering teams, right? It's not just the simple, yes, there's a brute force password spray attack, things like that. They're more complex and compound, and that's what we have to look at for these particular, cases. Now, going on to another thing is, I can't resist going back. I mean, going back to AI for a minute, right? Kind of looking back, in the year is, everyone's using AI, but actually one of the challenges is actually not that AI, or the fear is that AI is like, oh my gosh, you're going to get access to the wrong things. Well, it's actually, you got to look at the real problem, right? It's actually, are you oversharing, right? Or are you undersharing, right? In AI, it's still acting with my permissions, right? It's not giving me access to things I don't. But boy, I didn't realize I had access to all these things that I shouldn't have, right? And I think that's what the more interesting case. I've done some recent things at a conference, I think it was Madrona, in talking to some CIOs and saying that you need to first everybody look at your data access, data labeling, your data classification, right? For things. And this is where you may look at various tools or systems to help you to do this and say that, well, if all your data is labeled, what's sensitive, what's not sensitive, then it's going to be easy for AI to pick it up and do it properly, right? If you don't have data labeling and classification, then you're probably going to start off in a problem space and you're not going to want to use AI, and then you're going to be missing out. I certainly know, like my friends Gaudi and Sunil, agnostic.ai, right? They're helping companies, with that. Is people are afraid to use Copilot because they don't know what people are going to end up seeing, right? That they shouldn't. And so that's what I think of CIOs and CISOs need to think about. Take a step back, do some data labeling and classification, and then you're going to end up in a much better spot. And honestly, after I joined Atlassian a year ago, using Rovo, I can't live without it, right? How productive it makes me. It's unbelievable to live without it.
Certainly. Well, we should include links, all various products of Atlassian in description of the episode. We'll be happy to. Interesting. And I guess to continue on this thread, and something that I just realized fairly recently is that there is so much money being spent on cybersecurity in general. I think the number is 65, 70 billion a year between products and services and from hardware, software, services, consulting, and then obviously kind of the various splits. Probably 20% of that is government, and the rest is commercial, which is, I thought, was just fascinating. But at the end of the day, if you put on hacker's hat, they're not looking to ram the main door that's fortified. They're looking for the weakest link in the chain, which is often humans. And specifically, there was an instance recently, I think, at Coinbase, when internal employees, whether they felt they were underpaid or they were disgruntled, they were approached. And my understanding, that happens a lot. The hackers approach employees with bribes or promises of some sort of compensation for admin logins and or code. So the best defenses are not protecting you very well if there is someone on the inside who opens the door and lets the attackers in. And it's not really a problem that's easily solved. And I'm just wondering if there is a kind of a high level perspective on something like this. Is it a solvable and fixable problem? Is it just a matter of need to know access, or basically providing access to a certain group of people that are verified and trusted, so that it becomes creating friction effectively for attackers, and limiting the number of people who actually can spin up an admin account or reset the password, which I think was the case at MGM, when MGM was in a number of casinos in Las Vegas when they were bricked a few months ago.
Yeah, well, certainly, I think a couple of things is certainly we still know, I wish I could say it's 99%, it's probably 95%, is that the number one attack for everything is like you got phished and you're not using MFA, right? And that's not changing. I don't see it changing anytime soon. The biggest thing is I think as people realize is that you need to move away from the SMS, right? That's not the answer anymore. Anybody, right? Whether you use YubiKeys or passwordless, types of things, you need to move away to that. It's critical so that you can have more phishing resistant, kind of accounts. I think that's number one. But the other element is, I would say there's a very simple and easy way to think about it, or a simple solution, just buy, product X. But one way to think about is certainly the insider threat, right? Is that people that when there's collusion occurring, like, hey, I'm on the take, from From you name your favorite nation state attacker company or things like that. Um, but a lot of times we look at employee laptops and we look at their accounts as if they're watching that they're compromised. So we watching the patterns and things like that, saying, "Wow, we think that machine's been compromised. The way when it's connecting, what it's doing, what the user's doing." Right. In some ways, we need to think about users all the time. Is that assume they're always compromised, right? And so that we detect then when, wow, John Doe, right, is doing some things that he shouldn't be doing or shouldn't normally be doing, and so, but his machine's not compromised, like, but maybe he's compromised, right? That type of thing. And so you have to look at that more. I don't say XDR space because I think we're past XDR a little bit, right? Or the UBA, user behavior analysis, but more looking at the logs and activities and where they're connecting and then flagging it. It's not as hard as you think in some ways, but I think that's how many companies need to start thinking about it.
Interesting. And is it something that pervasive? Are CISOs thinking of that? And are they think of that as their mandate? And are they think of that as some of the challenges that should be on their one of the issues at the top of the list?
Well, I think it's what has kind of made it revive a little bit here is coincidentally, right? Is now we have AI, right? And a lot of people, hey, you're using AI. Whether it's you've got enterprise licensing or people are using the personal AI, subscriptions or licenses. Is what's the biggest mistake people are making? Oh, I accidentally put user data or restricted data or sensitive data into this external AI. Well, there's no redaction, there's no deleting, right? Things like that. You're no under agreement. And so what companies now need to do is realizing is not just is either to identify user is block them when they say you're about to send some sensitive data to the wrong spot, right? Or warning or helping them or warning them saying this is going to be sensitive data or logging it, so when it occurs they can solve it. And so that's kind of like saying that, well, when you start looking at, there's actually more than just the AI scenarios. There's like compromised user scenarios, right, that are popping out. So the DLP world is back again. It kind of went for a long time, right? It's like, forwarding emails, we could detect that, and copying, pasting a few things. It's kind of back again, and AI, I think, is kind of gives us some resurgence in it, and talk about DLP, the resurgence of DLP.
Mm-hmm. And basically, I was just wondering how high on the priority list of CISOs those potential compromise of employees and insider type attacks. How high is it on? How top of mind is this particular issue?
It's funny that you kind of bring this up. Is that if I think of from a couple years ago, right, it was not a big of an issue, right? People are like, it's a small thing, but really, I think now it's bubbled back up again quite a bit. As in some ways, you've kind of got the two different types of malicious insiders, right? Certainly, the one is people I'm accidentally making a mistake as an insider, right? I'm sending things to AI that I shouldn't be. And there's the cases a lot of people are sharing things more than I think we realize than they did a few years ago. And so I think it's coming up quite a bit more now than it did 3 to 5 years ago. And I'm seeing it popping up quite a bit in the CISO's list of things that they need to be worrying about.
And it's sharing valuable information for financial gain, or just accessing information they shouldn't have, but without malicious intent?
Well, certainly, I think there's a lot of different cases, but I think there's one of everything where they, want to move to another company, things like that. And I think we've been this whole kind of churn of things like that, and people unhappy with current situation with their companies and taking information with them and other things that they shouldn't be. Right? And I think now things with being in the cloud and other things, data is so much easier to move and do things with than it was, even a few years ago. I think people are much more finding it much easier to do and to do the wrong things, unfortunately.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, I think there were so many famous cases with, a lead engineer leaving from Waymo, going to Uber, self-driving car. Lewandowski, I think his last name was. It was a couple of years ago, but I can imagine your point with information being so accessible and portable. It's a lot easy. It's a lot easier now just to with a few clicks give yourself access or download or exfil something that you really shouldn't have. No, it's certainly understandable. Um,
Thinking of data though, I think of another angle. I think of kind of looking back this past year, things like that. Is you think about seams, which I mentioned before. It's like now there's so much data, right? Hey, we're adding new things. We're adding agents. We want logging. We want to add more logging of the users and what they're doing, right? To tracking them, to monitor them. And so we're creating a new problem. We got too much data in our seams, right? And everybody's looking at like, wow, the costs of the storage for seams is exploding, right? Like it's not a balloon, it's exploding, right? And I think this is where interesting that we're seeing this new kind of resurgence of technologies. Like some people are looking at Cribble and things like that, but like now we're seeing new startups like Beacon and others kind of come into play. Say, hey, are you pulling the right logs? Are you they're going to be actually effective and useful? Can you compress the logs, right? Can you optimize the logs? And I think this is one of the areas that we're probably going to see quite a bit here in the year ahead as well at RSA, because people can't pay millions of dollars a month, for storage just because they're collecting all the logs. And everyone wants you to retain them more and more, right? So I think that's a new challenge.
I wonder if there's an analogy from SOC, because I see a lot of startups addressing AI application in internal SOC environment where they before they have before companies would have 2-3 analysts that would prioritize alerts and address the critical ones, and non-critical they would just ignore. But now with AI tools can go through previously ignored alerts and surface the ones that need to be addressed and kind of remediate them without human in the middle. And I wonder if the same thought process, the same logic could be applied to the data, to the log data that being stored right now, to address the storage issue.
Yeah, Misha, I think you're spot on, right? Is certainly we can start looking at that. You look at the logs and saying, is AI can look at say, do you have any detections at all for these logs, right? Do you even need a detection for these logs? If not, maybe you don't need those logs at all, right? That could be an example of that, right? Or where the detection's coming from, all those type of things. Or where do you never pull these? They don't need to go in hot storage at all because they're never pulled. They should only go to cold storage. All those cases. And I think there's also elements you talk to go back to the SOC and things like that. And also let's go to the SOC. Let's talk about vulnerability management, where we're starting to see now with AI saying that, wow, here's all these vulns, and maybe they're low priority. Let's not talk about criticals and highs. Let's talk about the low priority, the ones that people don't want to do. Those are the ones that developers hate the most. Like, that's not my code. That's from 7 years ago. The person at the company no longer here. I don't want to go fix that small thing because I've never touched or looked at that code before. But this is a case, sometimes these low things are not that hard to fix. They're just time consuming. But AI can go in with high reliability, like fix all these different places, right? With high confidence, right? That humans just never wanted to do, right? And so I think we're seeing a major lift up in that particular area. And that's one of the areas that we've done here as a company with Rovo Dev as well, as we're starting to say, wow, we can do all these things automated. And the developer just has to say, yes, I'm going to accept this, right? It's quite amazing.
Interesting. Well, there's certainly a lot of hope for the future. Switching from looking back at 2025 and now looking forward 2026, what are your predictions? What are the 2-3 themes that will either continue to play out or maybe are emerging at the moment that you think will be top of mind for everyone in cybersecurity?
I think first I'm going to say a little bit is we need to move to more to passwordless, but it hasn't been easy yet, right? And I think of like how we can move to much more. Everyone's got MFA, everyone's got passwordless, but in a seamless, reliable experience with backup, right? So I think that's one of the things that we're trying to get there, but it's just kind of like key management we've been talking about for 20 years, but it's still a little bit too clunky. How do we get there? I think that's one. The second, certainly, I think is DLP is important, right? Is the reality is AI is going to be here forever, right? And it's going to evolve. Yet at the same time, we need to make sure we're protecting the data, right? That some things, that should be used only with local LLMs, right? In the sandbox, and some things, can go externally. But users are never going to be experts. Can every person in every company be an expert on that? No. And I think this is where we're going to see greater, better, DLP solutions, not just in the browser, but in the hosts. I think that's something that's going to be emerging enormously. I think the third item is, I think, with agentic, security, right? Is that we're going to see the evolution of our identity and access management, right? I think we're going to see some. I'm going to create the Gartner thing, right? The agentic, security posture management consoles, right? Because we need that. Agents are not going away, right? Also, building upon that is the dev model, right? Vibe coding's here, right? And so for some companies like ours, we're a dev company. Yes, you're going to have to go through the pipeline. This is the process. That's our culture. That's who we are. But name your favorite hospital or manufacturer or retail, right? And people vibe code. Are they going to know to go through a certain pipeline and dev, a security development lifecycle? No. So they've got to give them the tool saying, great, go vibe code, but use this tool so we can make sure that it's going to be secure, private, compliant, etc. Right? And so we need that space as well, because vibe coding and agents are here forever, right? Yet at the same time, the same problems that have existed for how many years, 30, 40 years now with security development lifecycle it still exists. So we have to help the people that are not developers be successful, vibe coders.
It's interesting. I think I brought it up during a previous conversation. Someone forwarded me a job posting on LinkedIn, vibe code cleaner upper. So it's certainly a sign of times that various departments, from sales and marketing to finance, they don't want to deal with asking the technology department to create an app for them. To just go to a variety of different tools to put something together that may or may not, that maybe address their needs. Maybe it's a demo of the product or a mock-up of a marketing website or whatnot. But if not done properly, I mean, potentially there's so many cases when an advertising agency was given access to company's internal servers for a specific campaign. The campaign ran and finished, but the access remained. And there's so many separate case, but there's so many instances when people don't have this perspective, the cybersecurity perspective, they're not aware how their actions may have unintended consequences. So
yes,
and AI just it's same problem on steroids. It seems like, which will make 2026 even that more fascinating. But it certainly will be interesting. I'll be very curious to touch base again towards the end of 2026 and kind of look back and see how your top ideas and top themes for 2026, how that play out. It would be interesting to have this kind of touch base and look back.
Yeah, absolutely. I say, hey, we're only a couple months away here, like only 3 months away. It's like I'm looking forward to us meeting up with the community, right, at RSA, right, and saying that,
Absolutely.
Okay, we've made some predictions here, what we think we're going to see at RSA, and what is at RSA, right, or what are we missing? I think that's we're only 3 months away. It's kind of exciting thinking about that, and with the greater community on that.
So maybe we'll do like a short video, like addendum to this conversation, and see, well, we told you, and now see, it's exactly what we predicted actually happened. It'll be
I love the idea.
Yeah, let's do that. Awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for your time. For listeners, if they want to get run an idea by you, or what's the best way to connect?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, and certainly things like that. A lot of people connect me there. I'm very responsive to that, and certainly people can follow me on my favorite travel blog, davidcrosstravels.com, right? Because my philosophy in life is work hard, play hard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Misha.